Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to this session of D Talks or Disruptive Literacy Talks. I'm your host, Mashood. As we continue on this journey of discussing ideas and of discussing disruptive solutions on how we can recover from the major challenges to education access, equity, and quality, which has been much more aggravated because of the COVID pandemic. It's important to understand where we stood before the pandemic, also before thinking of how we move forward as well. And one problem which has characterized countries which are low income and middle income, especially countries like India, has been the inequality of opportunity in education and literacy as well. And it is very important that as we move forward, where we see inequalities have been even more furthered, widened because of the pandemic, because of the digital divide. And we see that as we move forward, we have to make sure that what can we learn from the inequalities that had existed in our system, and how do we move forward from here? And to speak on this, to really demystify what educational inequalities look like, how they have manifested in the country, we have a very special and eminent guest. He is a professor at the University he's the director of the Center the Sciences Humaines here in Delhi, which is associated with the French government. He is also a professor at the University of Marseille, and he has a great diverse experience in multidisciplinary research in areas of social sciences and humanities. And one very specific focus of his research and inquiry has been the measurement of inequalities, especially in education. So it is an absolute honor for us today to welcome Professor Nicholas Gravel. Nicholas, it's an absolute honor to have you here joining us on Detox today. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Mashoud. It's also an honor and a pleasure for me to be with you. And I would like to thank you for making me aware of this fantastic NGOs that you are managing with your colleague, which seems to be doing excellent work on an important area, which is like the promoting basic education in India, including literacy and basic knowledge. It's actually a very big challenge. So and you want to do that from a disruptive point of view. You really want to look for creative ideas. So I'm myself an economist. I'm not a specialist of pedagogy, of teaching, or all of the kind of thing to do. But I do have made some work on equality of opportunities, and especially on equality of opportunities in education. And that's why I think I would like to say a few things about this topic, as you have said. So I'm going to do that. And what I want also to show you is some figure, some data on this issue, because I think it's important that we are concrete here about what we are after. India is a country which has been a fast-growing country in the last 30, 40 years now, a very fast-growing country. It was one of the poorest countries in the world in the beginning of the 80s. Now it has become a major player in the world economy. It has also made enormous progress in education. Education and economic prosperity goes, as you all know, hand in hand. Prosperous countries are countries where the population is extremely well educated, and the basic education is there for everybody. And so education is the key to prosperity, to success, to well-being. And India has made a lot of progress on that front, even though there are still progress to be made. And one of, I would say, the weakness of India in its progress, and I would like to argue on this a little bit, is that this progress has been very unequal. And Indian citizens, as they are are facing extremely unequal opportunities for education. And I just would like to emphasize on that and say a few words on this, if you allow. And so I'm going to show you some slides. So I'm going to try to share my screen. I was trained to do that very well by you, and so I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna share the screen,
Sure.
and I'm
Here,
gonna yes, and I'm gonna
here,
do that right now. Yes,
yeah, yes. So
and
here,
yes.
here, we would like to tell our audience also that Nicholas has a presentation, and he'll be sharing these his insights through the presentation. We would encourage everyone to also share their questions or thoughts on chat, and we this will be followed by a discussion. So yes, Nicholas, the screen is visible, and the stage is yours.
All right, thank you.
Uh,
And so I want to say this, therefore, a few words on inequality, opportunity, and education. And I want, before to start, say a few words about equalizing opportunities and what do we mean by that in economics and more generally in social sciences, I believe. It's equalizing opportunities means for economists equalizing the chances of success of individuals belonging to different groups. And of course, these groups to which individuals can belong may be tricky and is sometimes open to discussion because the idea of these groups is that they are groups which are formed by morally irrelevant characteristics. I mean, the best example are the family background, the caste, the gender, the income of the parent, the wealth, but we could have also skin colors, body weight. We could group people on many characteristics, and the choice of these characteristics and the relevance for social justice is open to discussion. And the idea is and in the literature on social justice, a criterion which is often evoked is the criterion of responsibility, because the idea of equalizing opportunities is to go a little bit beyond the idea of equalizing outcome. Very often, people are egalitarian in outcome. They want to equalize income, for instance, or health. But here in this approach, we want to equalize the chances, the initial chances that individuals have to achieve some outcome. And after that, so the story goes, people take their chance, and some people succeed and they achieve a very good outcome in their life. Some people don't succeed. But what is important, what is important is not sufficient, but it's probably necessary to have a just societies or a fair society, is that these chances be equalized among groups. And very often in this literature, you find this notion of responsibility. The idea is that people are not responsible for the group to which they belong, but they may be responsible for the outcome that they achieve in the group. So some philosophers in this branch of the literature are very keen on that. And so, for instance, so they like this idea that we could split these variables which affect individual destiny into things for which they are responsible, and things for which they are not responsible. Very often, they will think of the background, the skin color, the caste as things for which an individual is not responsible, but they would sometimes believe that people are responsible for putting a lot of effort in studying or in earning income. Well, religion is a delicate matter here, because are you responsible for your religion or not? So some people discuss about this. But in fact, I'm mentioning this discussion on responsibility because it's those of you who will read this literature, if you do that, will encounter these debates. But in my view, the distinction between the variable for which we are responsible and those for which we are not is a little shaky. It's a little shaky. And that's why the approach I'm going to favor here in my short presentation would be that, in fact, I'm not going to say anything about whether people are responsible or not for their success in life or whatever. What I'm going to assume, however, is that people are not responsible for the group in which they belong, in which they start their life. And therefore, the natural objective for social justice would be to equalize the chance among these groups. And so how do we define this chance equalization, these opportunities equalization, and how do we measure these opportunities? Well, the point of view that I'm favoring here, along with some philosopher, is the point of view of an impartial observer who would be placed behind a veil of ignorance with respect to the group in which this person, this abstract impartial observer may face. And this metaphor of the impartial observer has been developed very thoroughly by the American philosopher John Rawls in the 70s. The idea is that social justice has to do with impartiality, and impartiality must be envisaged behind a veil of ignorance. And the idea is that suppose we have a soul who is placed behind a veil of ignorance, how will the soul evaluate the opportunities faced by the groups in which he may fall? Imagine that this soul doesn't know whether he's going to be a Brahmin, or he's going to be a Dalit, or he's going to be a black, or he's going to be a white, or he's going to be yellow. He doesn't know, but he would like to compare societies, ignoring whose group is going to be. So how will an individual rank such groups? Well, the decision theory under uncertainty that economists favor would say that all of these social observers, if they are minimally rational, would compare the distribution of outcomes associated to every group in a way that agrees with what we call first-order stochastic dominance. I'm not going to give you a very sophisticated notion here, but the idea of first-order stochastic dominance is very simple. Is that imagine that the success in life is measured by an outcome which is ordered. So here we're going to discuss about education, educational achievement. So we can order educational achievement from no educational achievement, illiteracy, to, let's say, primary school, secondary school, university, and so on. So we can have an ordering of these year of completed education, for instance. And there will be first-order stochastic dominance if for every outcome, whatever defined, let's say literacy or primary school or secondary school, there is a lower risk of failing to achieve at least that outcome in the dominating group as compared to the dominated one. So if you observe that for every outcome, then you say that you have first-order stochastic dominance. If you don't observe that for every outcome, if it is true for certain outcome but not for all, then the two chances, the two distributions of opportunities are not comparable. And so that's the main criterion I'm going to use here, and I'm going to show you some pictures based on that. And this impartial observer also will be concerned to some extent about the inequality of these opportunities among groups. So especially imagine a society, and this society, you don't have to have a strong imagination to do that, because India will be like this in 1 or 2 minutes. I'm going to show you some slides about that. Imagine a societies where the groups are extremely unequal, so that their distribution of outcomes is ordered by first-order stochastic dominance. Not all societies are like that, but the Indian society is certainly like that when you focus on gender, for instance, or on caste or on religion. I'm going to show you some picture. So then, in that case, the impartial observer, if he has some concern for inequality, he would like to say that a distribution of opportunities between a society A and a society B will be better in A than in B if the worst group in A has better opportunities than the worst group in B. If the two worst groups in A have better opportunities than the two worst group in B, and if the three worst groups in A face better opportunities than the three first group in B, and so on, for all sequential combination of the bottom groups. And so this is also a criterion which we can justify, which exhibit a kind of aversion for inequality. And in the Rawlsian language, it attaches a priority to those groups who are the worst off in the societies as per first-order stochastic dominance. So this is a bit abstract, right? So we're going to now illustrate this very quickly with education, which I think is important for given the kind of and behavior that you are doing. So I don't have to convince anyone here in this audience of the importance of education, because if we leave aside natural resources, it is in the long run the most important contributor to growth, if not the unique contributor to growth and to prosperity. prosperity is the result of productivity of the human, and productivity comes from knowledge and from imagination, of course, and from education. From an individual point of view, it contributes to well-being, both instrumentally, through the extra income that it will provide. Most educated people get more income. And intrinsically also, sometimes we ignore this, but I mean, for you, I'm sure it's hardly worth mentioning that, even if you don't earn more money, if you are more educated, you will be more informed, you will make better choice with respect to your health, to your marital partner, and to many choices in the life. You will make better choice if you are well informed and you are capable of reading, calculating, evaluating things in a at least basic way. And the importance of education is shown by specialists to be decreasing with the level of education achieved. The more you are educated, the less return will provide you an additional year of education. This is true at least in the beginning of the education. It's not so true when you reach the tertiary education level, where the returns to education start again to become increasing. So there is a little U curve here that is going on. And well, of course, by far, primary education has the highest rate of return. And if you go even more like at the lower level than primary education, being literate has an even larger rate of return, as compared to being illiterate, for instance. And so I just want also to emphasize that India's performance is not outstanding with respect to basic education in literacy. It ranks, according to the United Nations, the UNESCO, it ranks 179th out of 250 territories with respect to basic education and literacy for its adult population. So it's not an outstanding performance at all. And here I'm going to show you some statistics about that. I'm going to show you the distribution of schooling outcome among certain groups that I'm going to discuss based on the NSSO data, employment and unemployment survey. And I'm going, more importantly, to focus on 2011 and 2012. Sorry, I don't think you can read the 12 here, which are the most recent year of those data. The NSSO data are very big sample data, which provide information on the year of completed education of adults. Okay, which in the things I'm going to show you is that it's concerned the adult age above 25 in the graph I'm going to show you. And so I have coded this variable in this picture from 1 to 8. Yes, and with some difference between the 2 years, but this is not very important. So the 1 means illiterate, 2 literate but without formal education, 3 below primary education, 4 primary, 5 middle education, 6 secondary, 7 higher secondary, 8 post-secondary. Okay, so which means university education. So if we look at these 8 years of level of education, so this is for I'm going to show you here in blue the male, the distribution of education in India in 1994, and this is the one, the pink is for female. So you can see immediately that there is a big stochastic dominance of male over female, right? If you take, for instance, the literacy, you have 20. This is in 2012, right now. So you have roughly 27% of the male who fail to achieve literacy. You have 49% of the female, age 25 years above, who fail to reach literacy. If you take now basic education like literacy, but without primary education, it's the same thing. You have you are at much lower risk if you are male than if you are female. If you take any outcome, any educational outcome, except of course the maximal outcome, because everybody is sure to fail to reach a level of education at least as large as post university, because everybody has some education below university. So of course here it's 1, but except here the 2 curves are completely ordered. So it means that the blue curve, remember, if you want to follow these graphs, that being below is better than being above, because you are at lower risk of failing to achieve an outcome. So here you have an amazing inequality of opportunities of education between genders in India. Okay, so I just want to emphasize how serious this difference here by comparing that with my country of origin, France, where, of course, the situation in education is a bit different. Of course, France is a developed country. It has been a developed country for a long time. So people have basic education, which is above that of India. For instance, literacy in France or illiteracy is not an issue. Like 100% of the people in France, or perhaps with some epsilon, are literate. But still, I want to emphasize that the difference between male and female in France is not of the same magnitude. So in France, the categories are different. One is no diploma or primary school, which is the bottom that you can have in France. Of course, you will be literate. Two is mid-high school. Three is professional high school. Four is completed high school, called baccalaureate in France. Five is professional undergraduate tertiary education. And six is general undergraduate tertiary education. Seven is graduate and postgraduate. So the labeling of these things is a bit different. And so here are the two curves, right? The blue is the male, and the pink is the female. You can see there is no first order stochastic dominance between the group. It depends which level you want to target. If you want to target very low level of education, then indeed French male are less at risk of being below the lowest level than female. And this is true also for the second lowest level. But if you switch to the third, that is the other way around. The female are less at risk than male to be below that third level. And they remain less at risk than male. And finally, if you go to very high level, then female are slightly more at risk than male to achieve, let's say, university degree. But overall, these two curves are very close. And, that's why there is no real gender ordering in terms of equality of opportunities in France, while, the one that you have seen in India is amazing. And so I want to emphasize these kind of differences. Now, let me show you some similar statistics with respect to religion now. Now I'm focusing on men in 1994. I want to show you also the evolution over time. So here I'm going to look at the religion groups: Hindu, Muslim, Christian, Sikh, Jain, Buddhist, and others. Others will be very often tribal in India, I suppose. And so here is the curve for the Hindu population. In 1994, 40% of the male were at risk of being illiterate, and so on. This is for the Hindu. This is for the Muslim. So you can see that the Hindu are doing much better than the Muslim, which is well known. But it's true for any level of education. There is first order stochastic dominance. Christian are doing much better than the Hindu. Much, much better. They are below. The Buddhist, these are the Sikhs, sorry. The Sikhs are like they are not so much better than the Hindu. It depends really upon the level of education that we choose in 1994, but they are definitely better than the Muslim, and they are worse than the Christian. And now we have the Jain. The Jain are always amazing in India in terms of school success, and they do much better than all of the other groups. And so they do extremely well in terms of educational opportunities that they provide to their member, as it is well known, I suppose. And then you have the Buddhist. Buddhists are, and Hindu and Sikh are not really comparable, but they are. Each of these groups is better than the Muslim and worse than the Christian. And then you have the others. The others are not very good, but they are still better than the Muslim, but they are worse than the other. Okay, so this show you that you have a strong inequality of opportunities among these groups. At least you had that among men in 1994, but you can see now in 2012, you're going to see that things have improved. Now the number of male who are illiterate among Hindu is less than 30%. It was 40% in 1994. So progress are there, but the inequality of opportunities remain. The Muslim do worse, the Christian do better, the Buddhist do, not clearly better than Hindu, but, and similarly for the Sikh, Buddhist, and Hindu are very similar, but they cannot really be compared. And then you have the Jain, who are amazing, and the others, which have made some progress, actually, more than the Muslim, because now the others are kind of, mixing with the others, even though they do better. So this is for 2012. For women, it's the same kind of thing, except that women do much worse in terms of equality of opportunity. So you have the Muslim woman, the Hindu woman, the Christian women, the Sikh women, and here you have a very big ordering. For women, you have a clear ordering of the groups. And then you have the Jain, who do much better, and you have the Buddhists, who are kind of... And so you have this in 94, and the others, and you have this in 2012. So I don't want to get into that, but I just want to emphasize that even in 2012, you have huge and massive inequalities of opportunities among religion. Okay. I want also to show why the different religions are treating men and women differently in terms of educational opportunities. So here I'm showing you the evolution among Hindu female and Hindu male of their opportunities between 94 and 2012. Okay, so this is the Hindu female in 2012. This is the Hindu male in 2012. Big inequality of opportunities. This is the Hindu female in 94. It was much worse, of course. So, and this is the Hindu male in 94. So what is a bit amazing, however, is that, the progress by women are not even sufficient to overpass, the level of the men in 94. So the women over these years have made progress. They have gone down. So the risk of failing to achieve literacy, let's say, has gone down tremendously, and so on. But it has not gone down to the extent that it could match what the men were in 1994. So they have not even overcome the male gap with respect to 1994, not to talk about the 2012. And the similar thing is true for Muslim. This is the women Muslim in 94, men in 94. This is the men in 2012, and these are the female Muslim in 2012. Here again, the female have not bypassed the male. The female in 2012 have not bypassed the male in 1994. However, if you look at the Sikh, then the Sikh, they have made some more substantive progress in terms of reducing the gender inequality, because here you have so can I read this? Yeah. So this is the women in 92. This is the women in 94, and you can see that the women in 92 are doing better than the male in 94. So at least they have bypassed the male in 94. Of course, they are not doing as well as the male in 2012, but this suggests that the gap between gender has gone down over time among Sikh, which was not the case among Hindu or among Muslim. And for the Christian, it's the same kind of thing, the same kind of pattern. These are the two female, and this is the male in 94, and this is the male in 2012. You can see that the progress among Christian female, they have bypassed the male, except for the low level of literacy. Okay, so these are some trend. I want now to show you also why we can talk about equality of opportunities across gender, and compare that between religion, because religion are treating differently, as we have seen, the male and female. So let us look at the Sikh and the Buddhists. It's interesting because Sikh and Buddhists have an almost similar average distribution of educational opportunities. This is the average distribution of opportunities in the Sikh in red, in the Buddhist in blue. So it's almost the same, with a little dominance of Buddhists with respect to literacy. The Buddhists are slightly better than Sikh for literacy, but overall, if you take any other educational level, they tend to be almost identical. But now, if you look at the distribution of that among gender, then you can see that it's quite interesting, because so here in dot you have you have the female, and in undot you have the male, and you can see that the Sikh, the distribution of educational opportunities is much more equal. It's almost within the blue one. So it means that, in some strong sense, and our theory that we develop in some paper would say that, in some strong sense, one can say that the Sikh are more equal among genders than the Buddhists. Okay. So now I want to show you some pictures also with respect to caste, to show you that with caste it's amazing. So these are the caste as per the Indian denomination of caste for the for the purpose of affirmative action, that is to say, scheduled tribe, scheduled caste, and general caste. These are the categories, and the general caste here include OBC. So this was in 1994. This is a scheduled tribe Hindu, scheduled tribe Muslim, scheduled tribe Christian. This was the scheduled caste Hindu, scheduled caste Muslim. This was the scheduled caste Christian. This is the general Hindu. They do obviously better. This is a general Christian. This is a general Sikh. This is the Jain. They don't have any categories of caste in Jain. And these are the others also. The others are there, right? And you can see how unequal these groups are. And there is almost always first order stochastic dominance. And so it's quite amazing. And so you have the similar pattern in these were among men. This is among female women for the same categories. And yes, and I can show that also for women in 2012. And so you still have massive things. If you look, for instance, at the bottom green here, which is a scheduled caste Muslim for women, it's horrible, right? The probability for a scheduled caste Muslim women to be illiterate, even now in 2012, 10 years ago, was above 90%. 90%. That's quite amazing. It's quite amazing as compared to what they were in for the Jain, for instance. So the inequality of educational opportunities among these groups in India is just amazing. It's just amazing. And I think it's one of the most urgent matter to work on. Of course, we need to improve those opportunities for everyone, but we need also to find a way to close the gap and to improve them much more for those unfavored groups. Now, let me say, and I'm going to stop there, let me say a few things about how these things also can be observed across Indian states, because these Indian states also perform quite differently with respect to the educational inequalities that they offer to their people, according to caste and genders. And I just want to focus on one case here, which is interesting because it is often quoted as the best state of India, is Kerala. You know, Kerala is very often depicted as the success stories of India with respect to health and education, because people are very much educated there. And indeed, Kerala exhibit very, I would say, favorable performance in terms of education. And it does therefore well in terms of overall distribution of educational opportunities, but it does not do so well in terms of the sharing of those opportunities among caste groups, because people sometimes ignore, but in Kerala, you do have a huge caste inequalities. Even though low caste people are not extremely important in fraction of the population, in Kerala, they are something like 11 or 12%, but the inequality between those groups is huge. And it is so huge that, in fact, Kerala cannot even be considered to be a better state in terms of educational opportunities than other states which are worse in average, but that do a better job in sharing these opportunities among groups. So here I want to focus on the state of Andhra Pradesh, that is doing much more poorly than Kerala with respect to educational opportunities. But nonetheless, Kerala cannot dominate Andhra Pradesh from the viewpoint of the ethical observer I was referring to in the beginning of my talk. So to do this comparison, we have done with my co-authors a slightly different coding of educational level, which is as follow. 1 is still illiterate, 2 is literate without formal education, 3 is below primary, 4 is below secondary or less, 3 is primary or less, 5 is below graduate, and 6 is graduate. So it's a little different from the one that I have used before. And so this shows you the average, the symmetric average for Kerala and Andhra Pradesh. So this is Andhra Pradesh, and this is Kerala. You can see that Kerala dominates at the first order Andhra Pradesh. No matter what is the target of education, the probability for a Keralian to fall short of getting that level is much lower than it is for Andhra Pradesh, in average. Even though the difference is not that big when one look at the high level of education, which is to say, undergraduate, for instance. Right? Here, they are almost the same. But otherwise, there is a significant advantage of Kerala. However, if we mix now the caste, then we can see that. So this is here in dot. Here we have the good caste in Kerala. This is the Andhra Pradesh. This is the good in Andhra Pradesh, the good in Kerala, the bad in. So this is Kerala and this is Andhra Pradesh. And what you can see is that, in fact, there is here a crossing of the curves. And therefore, the worst in Andhra Pradesh, they do the worst in Andhra Pradesh, which are the worst in Kerala. In fact, they do worse than the worst in Andhra Pradesh. These are the worst in Andhra Pradesh. These are the worst in Kerala. But the worst in Kerala, in fact, they have a higher probability of failing to achieve a level 5 of education than the worst in Andhra Pradesh. And because of that, one cannot say that Kerala offers better opportunities than Andhra Pradesh, even though it does so in the average. So this re-emphasizes the importance here in appraising the performance of states with respect to education, the importance, I was saying, of accounting for inequalities and of these opportunities among groups which are morally indefensible, I think. Right. So this is the conclusion for Kerala and Andhra Pradesh, and yes, which I mentioned before. And so I just want to summarize what I've said, and I will stop here. So there remains, and there are important, and I believe morally unacceptable inequality of educational opportunities among groups in India. It is morally objectionable that an Indian woman, just because she is from a scheduled caste and she is Muslim, has such a low opportunities of education as compared to, let's say, a Jain woman. There is absolutely no reason why these differences should be there, and there is, they are in some sense morally shocking, morally arbitrary, and they should be dealt with. And so, important effort should be devoted to this. Also, the figure I showed that the persistence of these inequalities over time, the 20 years period I considered here, remains, and they are important. Despite overall improvement, inequality of opportunities have improved. The opportunities of education, have improved over time, but the inequalities have not so much disappeared. And so this is, I think, problematic, because it means that in the education policies that have been put into place in India, not enough importance have been given to people coming from unfavored background. Okay, and indeed, the trend that we have seen show that the reduction of inequalities has been much stronger for male than for female, and so females are more affected also by inequality of opportunities based on their caste or their religion. And therefore, the equality of opportunities-based theory of social justice will require that educational efforts be concentrated on most disadvantaged groups. In India, these inequalities of educational opportunities are massive, and effort should be targeted, on low-caste Muslim women, for instance, which is the worst group that we have found. But of course, this is a big challenge, and that's why these disruptive approach that you are promoting will need to be even more disruptive than they are to face a challenge like that, which strike me as very important for the following years. And I will stop here. See if it's okay with
you. Thank you very much, Professor Nicholas, for this very enlightening presentation. It is truly. I mean, what you have put forward is something which we talk about in conversations, that there is inequality, but then you have very in a very clear manner, in a very elaborate manner, have given us the evidence that what does that inequality mean, and over time also how it has changed. So it's truly important for all who are working in the field of education and literacy to also have that empirical understanding of what inequality means, and how major the problem of inequality. So thank you so much, Nicholas, for sharing your perspectives and analysis on this. Some questions that we would like to ask you for the benefit of our audience. To start with, you mentioned about this, how primary education, or how the return to investment in primary education is actually the highest, and as we go to the subsequent levels of school education, that kind of return becomes less, and then it suddenly picks up for tertiary education. Would you like to share more about what does that mean, and why is that the case? Because that's a very important point that you made.
Mhm. Sure, I can elaborate a bit on that. Yes, I mean, so the return to education, as the audience may know, is if you take 1 year of education, this cost to the family who take the decision something, because you take 1 year, so during that year you don't work. If you are old enough to work, there is an opportunity cost, and you must face some cost. But on the other hand, you will get some return from this additional year of education that you can calculate to by various methods, including statistical method, because we know that from the estimation of what we call in economics wage equation, we know that one more year of education increase everything else being the same, the earning that you earn, and so that on this basis we can calculate the rate of return. And so, for instance, the rate of return on primary education, it depends upon the country, right? It depends upon the thing. Is roughly estimated to be something like on primary education, or something like 25, or 28%, which is, one of the best investment that you can make. Can you imagine making 25%, investment in your life? If you put some money in the bank, you're not going to get. So it's a huge investment. It's a huge rate of return. By contrast, the average rate of return on any year of education at the world level is estimated to be 9%. And of course, and so you can, the economists can measure, for every year at school, depending upon the level of education, the rate of return. So what this is telling you, I mean, if you are just a rational economist, is that we should, of course, encourage education, and parents also should educate their kids, when the rate of return is the highest. And so that's why, normally parents should react to that and should be very keen in sending their kid to school, especially at the primary school. Of course, the based on this is the issue of the COVID, the recent COVID situation, because still, the problem of some parents is that even though there is a return, on education, and a very high return, some of these parents, when they are very poor, they may not have the mean of doing the investment, because it's still an investment. If they are at the farm and their kids is 8 years old, he can work also on the field with them, and so it's a little cost for them to send the kid to the school. It's a little cost, and of course the cost sometimes may become very huge, and that's why I think it has been a catastrophe, this COVID thing, for many households in India, because for them, the closing of the school, which has taken place in the last 18 months. I think some of these schools have been closed since March 2020, if I'm not mistaken. At least this is my experience I had in Rajasthan and many villages I visited. So you have kids who haven't been to school at all in the last 18 months. Of course, theoretically, these kids could have connected through Zoom or through these devices, but we know that they don't do that, and so it's a real disaster. But I mean, I guess it's not really answering your question. So this, I hope I've been a little clear on what I mean on the return on education.
Yes.
And of course, here I'm talking about private returns, but there is also the social returns, which is a little lower than the private returns. And this, at least it is lower, but I believe it is lower because we don't really calculate well the full benefit of education. When we talk about the returns to education, we only look on financial return. That is to say, the increase in earnings that an additional year of education will give you. But of course, the benefit of education is not only in this earning. It's also in the ability of running a good life, of making good choice, making good decision about your health, about what you do, about the choice of your partner, where you live, and all of that. And this all of these, intrinsic benefit of education are not measured at all by this calculation. So that's why the social rate of return of education can be much higher than it is estimated. Now it is estimated to be a bit lower than the private cost for the simple reason that education is subsidized. And so private individuals, they do not pay the full cost of education because, school is free, at least the primary school is free and so on. And therefore, the apparent rate of return, private social rate of return is lower because than the private one. But this is due largely to the fact that we don't estimate well the benefit of education, which is not only the earnings but the ability to make good decisions.
Right. Thank you, Nicholas, for elaborating and kind of helping our audience understand about this. That it is not. Of course, it is financial return also, but there are the social returns as well, which are very important as well, and that's something which all parents or kind of policymakers have to kind of understand and propagate as well in the work. Another question that we had also about you've really set for us the inequalities of how they actually look when it comes to inequalities in educational opportunities. If we talk about why it is important, there is this social justice and moral argument to reduce inequalities. Uh, but if we talk about the economic argument, because a lot of policymakers understand more from what will be the economic returns to reducing inequality. Would you like to share a bit more about what would be the economic argument of reducing inequalities, especially be it between the gender and be it with social different social groups?
Yeah, I can certainly, even though unfortunately the issue of inequality and the issue of may not always be fully appreciated by some of my colleagues. After all, one can say that what is important is to increase, I would say, the average, to give to the average Indian citizen better educational opportunities. That is to say, to reduce the probability of falling short of achieving any level of education. And you could say that this is my objective, and I don't care if these inequality, these probabilities of achieving various outcomes are unequal among groups. You could say I don't care. And well, it's a legitimate. I mean, you can say that. And of course, so is there an economic argument in favor of let's say maintaining women, Muslim women of scheduled caste Muslim at this very low level of literacy? Of course, when you do that, you are from an economic point of view, you are wasting the talent of these people who are excluded from education. Okay, of course, you have this kind of argument. But if you really care only about the average, if you really care about the average Indian and you want to ignore the fact that these Indian may be Muslim, maybe Hindu, maybe high caste, maybe low caste, maybe male, maybe female, if you want to ignore all that, I don't think there is any, unfortunately, economic argument. You can say, well, I don't think there is a real economic argument in favor of equality. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm myself an egalitarian, and I think many people are egalitarian because we have a sense of that we form a community of human, that we should be, we are brothers and sisters, we are sharing the destiny. So there is moral arbitrariness in the fact that as a female, just because I'm a female, I have less chance of being literate and having access to basic knowledge. And when I'm a male, I mean, I found that morally completely arbitrary. But I don't think the economists, I would say, are particularly well equipped to give better reason than moral arbitrariness of the fact that of inequality. Economists are very interested in the size, the average size of the cake, and unfortunately, they don't. I mean, they not. I mean, some of them are. I mean, economists are very variable, but I mean, economics per se, there is no. I don't think efficiency argument, if this is what you have in mind, for promoting equality of opportunities among groups. Unfortunately, at least I don't. I cannot provide one, except the basic one of having cohesive societies. If you have societies which is very polarized with groups which are very different, you have a group that is completely uneducated, which cohabit with a group that is highly educated, you may have sometimes problem, social violence and things like that because of misunderstanding. But these are, I would say, non-economic arguments.
Hmm. Right. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on this. If we talk about, you've also talked about the investment, the inequalities in gender, right? So, do we have evidence, or if we are talking about why it is important to focus on the literacy of the female, right? Especially adult females also. Would you like to share a bit more if there are any evidences which talk about that how the investment in literacy and education of women of the household have led to better outcomes for the rest of the family?
Yes, yes, yes. This I can certainly, because obviously women is half the humankind, and indeed in many households they are from the female, and they will share labor supply and things like that, and therefore having well-educated women will mean high-earning women will increase tremendously. The standard of living of the household, and also like since women are less educated than male, if you take the rate of return argument, there is an economic argument for investing more money into the education, or more effort into the education of people who have less education. So the rate of return on female education is much higher than on male. So this already provide a signal that more research should be given to female. I also think that providing more effort for increasing the education of the female will increase the bargaining power of the female in the household formation, and this can also be good for the household and the well-being of the household, and the fact that female have more bargaining power, and for the yeah. And so these are the argument which could be given to any group, by the way. If you have any groups that is less educated, the rate of return on their education will be higher. This comes from the scarcity of their um, of their supply, because the education increase the quality of the work, that the labor that they will supply when they will be working. And of course, I could also add additional argument in favor of educating the women, because of the role that the women play in the division of labor within the household. We all know that women, for biological reason or for even for cultural reason, they tend to spend more time with the very young children, because they give birth to them and they have close contact with them. So if women are well educated, yeah, I'm talking here about basic education, basic health education, then they are more likely to take care of their young kid in a better way, even for very basic thing like taking health decision with respect to the kids, and feeding the kids properly and cleaning the kids, providing the kid with good care. And this will have a huge future benefit, as you can imagine, because these kids are going to be future citizens, and if they are well nourished and well taken care of at the early age, we all know that this is the source of major impact on their future productivity. And given the role played by women on these, on the care of the kids in the early stage of the life, this provides an additional argument for at least providing a basic education to women.
Right. Thank you for sharing that those ideas. We also have some comments here. I think Tista is talking about, in many works of inequality of opportunity, schooling of children is seen to be heavily dependent on the mother's education, and sometimes more than that of the father's. And yes, uh, here we have one I think question from Shifali. Irrespective of caste, religion, gender, and social status, all these play an important role in getting opportunities or for education. What should be the best way to start addressing these issues, especially after the pandemic, where there's a significant dropout of girl students? Is there based on this question, do we have I just wanted to add to this question also. You didn't mention France, right? And you mentioned that how it is, of course, at a completely different level because of it's a developed nation historically also. But do we all the countries who are near universal, education, basic education, literacy now, do we have any evidence to show that how these countries reached this level, and uh, maybe a country which was not at a universal basic education literacy level but has managed to kind of reach that level? What did it take for them, and can India learn from that experience? Your
Well, I
thoughts?
think the historical experience of France is quite interesting on that respect. France was clearly lagging behind many European countries. In the late 19th century, especially. I mean, after the Prussian and French wars, which was a disaster for France. Then the many people like realized that French people were very little educated as compared to German, to British, and to many other European nations. And so the Third French Republic, they decided to implement this compulsory education program, which was a success story, right? The French government, they took the money, they developed the system, they sent school everywhere in France, they sent the teachers with clear, it took two generations. And in the First World War, the French level of education was just almost perfect, at least with respect to literacy. The literacy was not an issue anymore. And so it was done by the state, by a willingness and a big effort that at least India could do. I mean, there is no reason why the India cannot do what France has done in 40 years. And so I think India has neglected that issue for a long time. I think now it is changing. It has been changing in the last 20 years, I think, more than before. But I think in the early stage of post-colonial India, my understanding is that the leader at the time, including Nehru and all of these fantastic figures, I don't think they they put sufficient effort on that. I think Nehru was very excited about having top universities and top schools, and in fact he did very well on that. India maintained an extremely high profile university with they have Nobel Prize in the 30s, and they maintain this top academic institution which were amazing, much more advanced than what we can find in China, for instance, at the time. So they put a big effort on high education, but I think they neglect a little bit the basic education for a long time. So that's, I think, with sufficient effort, I mean, it can be done. It just takes, school that works, a teacher that works. It's not that expensive, also, to have a teacher, it's that you pay reasonably well, to have some school, and to have some good method of teaching, and then you just do it, and compulsory education for everybody, and you get it after after 20 to 30 years.
Right. Thank you, Nicholas. I think on that note, yeah, on that positive note, that yes, it can be done, and we can, India can kind of, with this new policy on education, also with focus on foundational literacy, numeracy, and basic education. It seems that there is a positive turn around this decade, and we hope that in the coming time also, this is something which is taken very seriously, right from the very top political leadership all the way to the grassroots. Nicholas, we would like to thank you once again very much for your valuable time, and also for really demystifying what we understand by educational inequalities, and you've kind of helped us understand India's trajectory as well. And I think this will give a lot of ideas to the people and organizations who will be watching this video also in the coming time, as they address, when we are talking about quality education, we also have to address the inequalities as well, to actually have a society and a country which is developed for all people. So once again, thank you so much, Nicholas. And we'll also want to thank the audience and who will be watching this video. We hope that Nicholas has has triggered a lot of thoughts and ideas in your mind with respect to education and opportunities. Thank you.